Thank you for inviting me to talk with you from here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. One of the most present concerns, I think, at the moment for current AI is that it has greatly increased our ability, even in simple ways, to distribute persuasive arguments that are intended to lead people perhaps to do harm, right, to do things which are arguably harmful. And the recent release of ChatGPT, which many of you will have perhaps experimented with a little, has only increased that concern. ChatGPT is an extremely capable system. It is clearly not without flaws, and will be, I think, subject to very rapid development and improvement, including experiments with adding rule-based constraints and other softer modifications of its behavior. But it's already very powerful, and it's interesting and a little bit worrying in as much as it's the first system that seems as if it might be able to construct a persuasive argument for an individual person on a topic, which would lead them to towards having a particular point of view or towards performing particular actions. Many such persuasions might be innocuous or even positive, but they could certainly be used for harm. So I think this development and the suggestion that such capabilities are going to rapidly escalate over the next few years does put in focus the topic of this panel and symposium. So are we ready to have a vastly increased capability in machines of making persuasive arguments to human beings? There are many concerns that one might have about AI, but that one seems particularly present. And I'm not sure that the approaches that we have been discussing so far, and even beginning to regulate on so far, are going to be particularly helpful in this regard. For example, one large stream of work in AI ethics is the question of whether you can make these systems, including text generation systems, explainable. But explainability sort of comes in two forms. Either you can generate a explanation which is closely connected to how a system actually operates, in which case the system either has to be quite simple in order for that faithful representation to be understandable, and if the system is simple enough for it to be readily understandable, it's unlikely to reflect well on the nuances of real life, real problems and real ethical behaviors, or it will produce an explanation which is related in some way to the behavior of the system, but in some sense is no more reliable than the output of the system in the first place. So I think we should be very cautious about too quickly regulating systems before we really understand how they might be used, and especially before we really understand how they might be developed. And we should also be quite careful in expecting that regulation of AI systems should have the same constraints and the same expectations and rely on the same sources of knowledge as the ways that we regulate human behavior. So, for example, by having rigid constraints, which the inapplicability of which in particular contexts has to be dealt with by case-by-case legal reasoning in a judicial system. That seems very unlikely to scale well to AI systems, and therefore we might wonder about whether or not the process of regulating these systems can be scaled along with them, and what form constraints on these systems might take.